Have you guys seen the Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania online wars? How many of you guys have seen these? Have you seen? And we go at each other, right? What if we looked at each other and said, guess what I love about you, Kenya? You guys move with so much energy. Vigor, energy, you guys are on the move. What an amazing country. Look at Nigeria and say, hey, you guys are innovative. And culturally, you really hold on to culture. Do you know why don't we have those conversations? We're talking about the loss of AGOA, Francis, today. Loss of AGOA, loss of AGOA, loss of AGOA. But AFCFTA is right here. Today, Kenya's biggest trading partner for tea is Egypt. Already, we have the potential of really taking that AFCFTA and driving it forward, but nobody's talking. And me as media, I want to take some responsibility here and tell all my media brothers and sisters, how about we face the opportunities on the continent, highlight them, stop talking about the loss of AGOA and go into, can AFCFTA present an opportunity for the African continent? And so maybe a way to keep Rahab's memory alive for me is, how do I make us see the best of who we are instead of continuously focusing on the West? And why is this important? I don't want to overemphasize, but Francis has said it. Thought leadership is determined by stories, by voices, perspectives that are out there, by narratives. If we don't shape our own narratives, we cannot drive the thought leadership for the African continent. And sadly, we have been operating in auto mode for a very long time, where we allow others to shape the narrative, and then we very happily jump on and pick that narrative. A few years ago, 2 years ago, I was in South Africa in Durban, and I visited the Moses Mabhida Stadium. It's an amazing football stadium. Now, interestingly, in this football stadium, there's an exhibition. It's a permanent exhibition space, and it's called The Making of South Africa. And my husband and I and our youngest son walked through that exhibition, and nobody spoke from the first picture to the end. And when we walked out of there, we were quiet. Pin drop silence. The first image is a picture from way, way back. And it's an image of a man who looks like an African chief of some sort, and what would have been a colonizer, it looks like, and it says on the picture that this was published with the caption that the gentleman holding the neck, the African chief, was giving treatment to the African chief. The story is, and it was debunked many, many years later, that this was a Namibian chief, and actually he was being beheaded. He was being beheaded. But when that story went out in the media, it was shared as he was being treated. Now I want you to sit with that for a minute and understand the power of twisted narratives to control and to determine what happens in a society and community. Today, this was hundreds of years ago, over 100 years ago. Today, ladies and gentlemen, if you go to social media or go to Google and just Google propaganda, troll farms or factories, just Google it, and take a look at how many of them are focusing on African dynamics, on African issues that are not even on the continent, but that help to direct, shape, divide, build conflict in terms of how we think and the things we do. And then when you've studied that, I want to ask yourself, who has the time and energy to invest in troll factories and farms to shape African and African diaspora conversations, and to what end? I say this to emphasize the fact that while we are not strategic about our storytelling and our voices and what we do and how we do it, there are actors who are highly strategic. And whether they are looking to gain resource on the African continent, whether they are looking to shape political discourse for one reason or another, we are innocently and naive, in a naive position of having our own agendas controlled by others. It's not something I enjoy saying, but it is a fact. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me then to say to you that African narrative sovereignty is one of the most important things that Africa can do today to drive change and transformation and build a future of Africa that Africans aspire to see. What does this mean? This means tell your stories. Tell the story of what you see and what you experience every single day. And where you think change needs to come from, use your voice, whether it's in your boardroom, in your organization, in your school. Let's go a step further. And at my organization, the Africa Leadership and Dialogue Institute, we're just about to embark on what we call an Africa Story Harvest, where we're going to tell people to go back into their communities and go to the elderly in the communities. Have a cup of tea and a meal with them. Make time to sit with them and to listen to them. And ask them, tell us your story. Tell us about when you were young. What do you remember? What did you go through? What is the true history of your community? Even what games did you play? How much do we know about African traditional sports? Something as simple as that, right? What did you learn from your elders that we must document to pass on to our grandchildren as well? That is so important. For the educators in the room, you know, I look back at my history lessons and I remember learning that Henry Morton Stanley met David Livingstone on the shores of which lake? Huh? They met on the shores of the lake, and Henry Morton Stanley looked at Dr. Livingstone and he said, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?" And today I wonder why I had to learn that. I wonder why I did not learn more about our independence heroes. I heard about Dedan Kimathi, but it's only in studying him over the past few years that I realized he was not an illiterate person who fought for our independence. He was a highly literate man. How many people knew that? That Dedan Kimathi was a researcher who was working in a laboratory when he decided he was going to step out of that world to fight for the independence of Kenya. But that's not on my curriculum. I didn't learn it. I didn't know it. And so we feel like our independence heroes, some of them were illiterates who didn't know what they were doing. They were just kind of trying to get some space for us. And then we went into a system that really aligned us to what I feel was non-cultural, non-traditional, non-local African thinking. I believe in Africa today, we have a chance to connect to our roots, but also to connect to the global excellence that we want to achieve. Nothing should stop us from doing both. And so I really hope that we're able to do that. As I come towards the end, what must we do? Number one, Marcus Garvey said, and Bob Marley sang, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." We must do that. And this is not just for Africa. I think the whole world is coming to a point where we need to ask ourselves, who are we? Are we who we are? Why do we do with the things that we do? And how can we root ourselves on equity, humanity, love, to the spirit of Ubuntu, I am because you are, which really is love thy neighbor as thyself. That's really what that spirit is. Number two, we must harness policy and practice to adjust to new systems of thinking. Let me reference the Indigenous communities in Canada and many Indigenous communities around the world. You know, for so long, education systems stripped them of their knowledge, stripped. And now what we're learning is in Canada, those Indigenous communities are protectors of the land today. And their local Indigenous models of working the land are being heralded and celebrated today as models that we should all learn and adapt. But they were told at one time they were uncivilized. How do we rethink what we are offering each other as education? Go into our communities, pull the valuable lessons and learnings and embed them within our systems of education and within our policies. Finally, we must harness our African voices. And here I want to really call on African media influencers, including myself, to make a difference in how we feature African voices, how we shape African narratives, connecting to the so what for Africa. Why do we do what we do? In this call to action, there's a call to all of us. As I said at the beginning, your lived stories are important. How you share them within your families, within your communities, in your schools, with young people. Again, Indigenous communities in Canada, the First Nations, have a way of using elders and matching elders with young people so that the knowledge of the elders does not die away with them. And so an elder has a commune of young people who are their nieces and nephews, not biological, but their nieces and nephews, and they teach them. How do we start to harness that in Africa so we don't lose the wealth of knowledge in our elder generation? I'm going to close by saying BeDoCare is a lovely theme, and so I want to use it. Number one, let us be custodians of Africa's narrative to drive to the Africa we want. Let us do by ensuring that we do the work of integrating storytelling into policy and into education. And let us care enough to collaborate beyond sectors, to partner and to work together and to figure out how to make a difference together. I'm going to close with 3 African proverbs because I love them. Such wisdom in African proverbs. The first one, by the time the fool has learned the game, the players have dispersed. Dear Africa, excuse me, I am so sorry, but we are on the field smiling and cheering, but we don't realize there's a game being played. And people are playing the game very often at Africa's expense, very often at our expense. We need to learn the game. The second one is that teeth can only chew and bite when they work together. Just imagine the singular tooth, one singular tooth. That's great. Okay, it's not going to achieve very much, even 2 or 3. Progress, but maybe not enough. Let's work together. Let's pull together. It's so important. And the third one, knowledge is a garden. If it isn't cultivated, it cannot be harvested. It is our collective responsibility to cultivate knowledge, to celebrate our diversity, and then to enable the harvesting of this knowledge to really advance the aspirations of the African continent. You know, as we started, I heard those words. Every person is called to sanctity through the daily work that they do and through their ordinary lives. We're one race, we're the children of God. And my challenge to all of us is if these things are true, what responsibility then sits on our tables, on our shoulders, even when it comes to the African narrative and African storytelling. Thank you so much.